You're doing this. What do you want to do? Let me do that in the pledge and then.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you very much. So you have, Lynn sworn. So I'm going to church Sunday, so this is the governor's just hanging on.
So we are live now.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of our Interstate Compact for this month to order. And with that being said, if you will all join me in standing, we will say the Pledge of Allegiance right over here. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today to participate in our meeting. For those online, we welcome you also. We welcome your input and your feedback. At this time, I'll call on our Commissioner, Nick Zoika, to carry on with the program.
All right. Thank you, Representative Loftus. The first item of business on our agenda for this afternoon is a series of updates that'll be provided to us by Dr. Angie Mullinex, Director of Innovative Practices and Programs here at the Department of Public Instruction.
Great, thank you so much. So we have wrapped up our 2021-2022 Purple Star Award designation period. We've collected all the applications, reviewed the applications, and notified the award recipients. We had a lot of renewals this year. Last year I think we were at like 286 awarded schools, and originally we were at 299 this year, and then I had two who submitted late. They had staff who were out due to COVID for an extended period of time, and they contacted me and requested to still submit their applications. So we had 301 applications, so we still grew. So for the third year in a row, we have grown. Not quite to the amount of schools that I want to see. I still have the goal of every single school across our state by 2024. I know that's a very big goal, but I think we can continue to share the message. This year, our application process was a little bit different in that we allowed skip logic for renewals. Because this is still an annual award, every year you know that you have to apply if you are interested in being a Purple Star designated school. And so, for example, when Howard schools submitted, they just easily could bypass through if some of those pieces had not changed from the prior year. We did have some new schools that applied that were first year applicants, but many of them were renewals. So we're just pleased that we haven't seen a decline in applications and that we're continuing to increase those. We have decided to go ahead with a virtual ceremony this year. The RSVP is linked online through our board docs, but I'll also email that out to you as well. The award ceremony is going to be virtual for a few reasons. One, we still aren't quite at a place where we can have those large mass gatherings that this would involve when we start involving all of those awarded schools to have their representatives come, our legislators, members of the public. Then it gets to be a very large number. So we decided for virtual, but in addition, those awarded schools, the individuals we would be inviting are principals or assistant principals and superintendents. And we don't feel like we're in a place right now with so many staff shortages to put them in a position that they would need to leave their campuses. So we're going to hold a virtual ceremony again. So save the date for May 11th, and that will be from 1 to 2:30 p.m. So it'll be in the afternoon that day. Yeah, and so that's our update for our Purple Star Award designation.
Great, thank you very much. And I see, the next thing you're gonna share with us is Fort Bragg Day.
So, we had, a very nice visit. Dr. Stegall was on that visit, Superintendent Truitt and some members of her cabinet. We were invited to go alongside, the recruiting battalion based out of Raleigh, and travel around Fort Bragg to visit some places. We stopped at a special operations training facility. We saw lots of, STEM-connected, projects that the students that are learning to be special operations troops were engaging in, heavily influenced with STEM, which was really interesting to see as educators, to see the links to the real world application. We also, and I'll have some pictures of that here in a little bit. We also heard several pieces of information regarding recruitment efforts. That really impacts us in the K-12 realm. We have about, out of 10 students who, or potential recruits who go into the military, recruiters interested in serving, about 7 of those are disqualified for a number of reasons. It could be health issues, it could be their criminal background. For a number of reasons, they might be excluded. So 3 of the 10 are not excluded, but out of those 3, about 1.5 meets the ASVAB requirements, which we know is the test to enter into the military. So thinking about that as a K-12 educator and K-12 educators in this space, the areas of focus for that are English and mathematics. So we learned about a tool that is free to all school districts called March to Success. The way that tool is accessed is you simply reach out to a recruiting office and say that you're interested. That tool provides self-paced supports for the ACT, SAT, and ASVAB. So March to Success, I would say that was definitely one highlight that we gleaned from that visit. Another highlight as we think about instructional practices that are taking place in our schools, and specifically in our classrooms, was how important it was that the military said they need communicators and critical thinkers. Those soft skills that we talk about, we know those are important as we move into a portrait of a graduate as a state and developing that portrait of a graduate. We really see the significance of that with all of our students, no matter what their post-secondary plans are. Let's see. So here are some photos. The top left is, so that was sort of like, if you're familiar with a mount city, like a training city, that was sort of a mount city within their compound. That was a building where they would, they had simulated explosives and chemicals and other reactive elements that they might encounter if they came into a house like that on one of their searches. Which was really, really cool to see, I think, and putting the significance of the mathematics and sciences to practical use and knowing how to, our soldiers and service members need to be able to go in and identify those, and so that's where that K-12 academics piece came in. We met with the Fayetteville Tech Community College rep out there at Fort Bragg, and we heard about some of the educational opportunities, the bonuses, the different ways the GI Bill can be transferred to children and their dependents, just various ways that really painting the picture of the benefits of the military. And as military connected individuals, mostly sitting in this space right now, and perhaps listening to us live stream, I think that's important for us to then share that message to our civilian counterparts who may not be familiar with the military, who may think that's still possibly a backup plan if something else fails, right? That's not the case with our military today. We know our military service members are highly educated. They are compensated very well, both monetarily and also with their health benefits and education benefits. And they are professionals, and they are in professional environments a lot of times. So it was a really informative visit. Like I said, we saw lots of high-tech labs. Dr. Stegall, do you happen to remember the name of the tool that they were using where they were like scanning, or in the lab, and they were like using the
No, yeah, it was to test for foreign chemicals.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, they handheld. They can measure. They can take a sample of something and tell you what explosive it was, what type of compound it was. Like thousands of them. It could give you a readout really quick. It was pretty impressive. And they had some non-military groups they were training with them. They were training on using the device as well. Some government officials. So.
Yeah, it was really like super high tech. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you think back to your chemistry class and you're like, oh, I realize why I need to learn that. And so us taking that, right, and putting the why of why students need to learn the information into our K-12 schools, that project-based learning, STEM learning, really comes, into play in a lot of their future endeavors beyond high school. So again, here's just some more photos, leadership skills, durable skills, those soft skills, credentialing opportunities, the funding that goes to those who are interested in the military, the bonuses, the college, lots of avenues for growth. So as we took this back as an education agency, those things that I pointed out, making sure that we are being mindful of what our students will experience post-graduation and preparing them as best as possible while they're in the K-12 environment. So essential for all of our students, not just military-connected students, but every single student. They may not leave high school and go into the military. They may go to college and they may enter the military later on in life, or they may work, alongside the military in a civilian position. So many different avenues for them, and lots of opportunities. Okay. So the next visit, are you okay with me?
Absolutely,
going ahead? Okay,
yes,
cool.
ma'am.
Thanks. So the next visit that we went on recently was to St. Augustine's University. Brigadier General Harrison from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He's the Air Defense Artillery Commander. He came to St. Augustine's to speak to their ROTC students. Really, he's from North Carolina, and he wanted to come back and pay a visit to some students and really encourage them and motivate them. So myself and Tabari Wallace, who is our superintendent's advisor for principal engagement, he came alongside me and we listened to General Harrison speak. He did a sort of myth versus fact with the military with those young kids, and it was really neat to let them ask questions to him on what they thought was true or not true about the military. Some of them in the back had family members who came and listened to it, so it was a really neat experience for them. He sort of walked them through his journey as an ROTC student and how he, every summer, he challenged himself to get better and better and better. And that's why he finds himself sitting as a general today. It's because he never settled for just being okay with the status quo. After our visit later on that afternoon, Superintendent Truitt went to visit with General Harrison and had a sit-down conversation with him and discussed education in North Carolina and our efforts to supporting our students to be sure that they are prepared post-graduation for military or any other career journey that they are on. So that was a great visit for us to have him come. And then next week, I believe it's next Wednesday, we will be, myself and Superintendent Truitt, along with many other state agencies across North Carolina, are going to be meeting with the ambassador of Botswana. To my understanding, there's currently an MOU with Botswana, and there have been previous meetings. I think several, maybe 2019 was the more recent meeting of when the previous ambassador came and visited. But they periodically do these visits to inform on what we are doing here as a state, so that the ambassador can take that information back to Botswana and improve their systems and processes in government. So we will be discussing Operation Polaris, and our support for K-12 students. Alongside us will be the UNC system president and the community college president as well. So I anticipate that will be a great meeting, and Doug Taggart in his office is working to support that as well. Okay. And then,
Just before we move to the next agenda item, I wanted to give folks an opportunity to ask any questions based on all the good information you just presented. And if I could, I'd like to ask one related to the March to Success test prep program. So is that something that all of the recruiting offices have in-house as a resource for themselves and prospective folks? Okay. And is that something that's controlled through DOD, or is it a program? I'm just thinking, out here ahead of myself, wondering what access school systems like Cumberland County Schools might have to a resource like that, because I'm not sure that in the general K-12 education realm that we have anything like that helps kids prepare for SAT, ACT, and ASVAB.
right. So this is provided through the Army, but it is available to all students across North Carolina, whether or not they are interested in the Army or not. It is a free tool. The Army designed it because they are having so many students struggle to score high enough on the ASVAB and to pass the ASVAB.
And there's an ASVAB app that's free as well that you can take. You can take sample tests and get feedback on it real time, and gives you. I don't know as much about the tutorials that go along with it, but you can see what the test is like. Take some. I think there's some sample problems on there, and then gives you some feedback on it. So, and those are free as well.
Is that March to Success? Is that the name of the app, or is this something different?
The Army of One, it's on the Army of One webpage.
Yeah, it is.
Army of One.
Yeah. The ASVAB app is separate from the Army of One webpage.
Yes, I know in Cumberland County, we also been using the March to Success for a couple of years, and we've been passing it out to students to enhance their teams or their scores. We also found some information, it may not be on here, and I might be sharing too much. One of the Navy recruiters told me that the Khan Academy has also been helping members to increase their score more than 10 points. So the Navy has been using Khan Academy also right along with March to Success. Now, the March to Success is readily available to all students that we've been pushing it out to. And the Khan Academy may have a little bit more restrictions to it, but we're talking about increasing scores so we can promote post-graduation and stuff like that. So those two forms that we've been working with recruiters to work with in Cumberland County. Sorry, Carlos Swan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Again, the floor is open. Any questions for Dr. Molinex on her information?
One thing about like the Botswana ambassador, so the National Guard has two different programs. They're state partnership programs. Botswana is one of them, Moldova is the other one. Had them for many, many years. I couldn't tell you how long they've been a program for the National Guard. So very important. I think Secretary of State does more with.
There's three elements of the state partnership program. There's military to military, there's military to civilian, and civilian to civilian. And in the case of Botswana, Secretary of State Marshal's office has the lead, but it's all run through the state partnership program, which is tied back to, in Moldova's case, UCOM, European Command, or in Botswana's case, African Command. So it's funded out of those combatant commands to include a lot of the civilian to civilian engagements, and it's anything from training to information, knowledge, and data sharing. But we've had a long relationship with them, and Botswana has a really, really advanced educational system in their country. So they take a lot of what I assume the department provides them, and it's paying off back in Botswana.
One correction to that too is that Rick Long and Assistant Secretary Conte are the one coordinating the Botswana piece. It's not on that record.
But then the Guard has an individual in both of those places that,
Yeah, we have a foreign affairs officer that's permanently stationed in those two countries, and they facilitate both the military and the civilian to civilian through the appropriate department.
This is a good piece for us to hear about. This is the first that I've heard of it. And so as we see that our military connected students are coming in and transitioning into our schools, to have this component and to hear about it, especially in this meeting, I think that as we continue to bring this down into our schools, Cumberland County, more Lee Hardy, I think this is a good piece for us to, even when we have our educators meeting, for our superintendent to actually bring this down and let our garrison commander bring this, and then our superintendents have this discussion. So this is a wonderful piece to hear about.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Angie, I don't remember, did you say that Mrs. Truitt was going to be visiting the other installations at different times, or was that something I dreamed up? From another
No,
time?
to my knowledge, I don't think there's been
Okay.
an invitation, but
Okay.
I'm sure if the invitation is put out there, she probably would.
Okay.
Anybody else before we move on to our next item?
I will add one piece, and Dr. Stegall is going to visit Georgia that you're going to in the summer.
Yeah, the installation is right outside of Savannah. I can't remember.
Fort Stewart?
Yeah, Fort Stewart.
Yeah, Fort Stewart. And he's doing like an immersive.
Take some bug
day.
spray. They sound like Huey helicopters.
Oh, yeah. It's a week-long leadership thing.
Oh, yeah,
They
you'll
invite
need
one
some
state
bug
leader.
spray.
Yeah.
Don't I supposed to drive you?
Yeah, come on. I get to drive with the, I get to jump out of the airplane with the, is it Golden?
Golden Knights.
You doing that on 29th?
Yeah, you going? Yeah. Come on.
You'll have a battle buddy now.
I'm the plan. I'm one of the planners for that.
Awesome, I'm excited about it. Very cool.
Just see the
great.
recline yesterday.
I think the menu is MREs, morning and evening, so
I've eaten before.
you'll get a hot lunch, but other than that, you're MRE.
Well, we will move on then to military connected students and report on COVID-19 impact analysis of lost instructional time. And we have Kaylin Clifton, a research analyst with the Department of Public Instruction, to share with us.
Thank you, sir. So yes, everyone, good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Clifton. I am a research analyst at the newly formed Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. Former classroom teacher from Charlotte, North Carolina, but I've been working in quantitative research for about 3 years now, and I joined the team in December. And I actually just bought a house in Raleigh a couple days ago, so I'm super excited to make the formal move out here.
Taxpayer.
Thank you very much. It's my first home. So I got called to just speak a little bit about the recent report you may have heard. We partnered with SAS, which is an analytics firm out of Cary, to study student progress over the pandemic. I'll speak more on the report there. But when I got the nod to come speak with you all, I realized I didn't know too much about the military-connected population in North Carolina. So the first thing that I wanted to do is just put together some numbers to help myself understand these students, these families, these communities. So one of the first things I like to do is just collect some high-level statistics to just see what I'm working with. Basically, I've got a couple visuals here. I'm just going to walk the group through each at a high level, and I'll take questions at the end. On the left, you can see a table featuring the top 5 PSUs or school districts sorted by total enrollment. That's just to count the number of military-connected students currently in the data as of February 2022. That's the first column there. So you see Cumberland at the top, 14,700. The next column is, well, what percent of that district is military connected? So in Cumberland County, that's 30%. So roughly 1 in 3 students is a military connected student in Cumberland County. And the final column there is, well, of the whole state population of military connected students, what percent of the entire state population exists within Cumberland County? And that's about 15%. So a large number of students that are military connected are in Cumberland County, as well as just a large proportion of the state population overall. And then you can kind of look down the table there at the rest of the numbers. One thing that I think is personally interesting there is Onslow County, even though they have fewer military connected students, it's more likely that a student there is military connected. And it's kind of a smaller district, so they make up a larger proportion. On the right there, it's kind of difficult to see, but basically the story that this tells, when I'm looking at it, I don't know much about them. I heard people say, well, they're concentrated out in the eastern part of the state and what have you. But one of the things I decided to do is kind of look at just the distribution of these students to see if, where are they just by the numbers. And the story that tells there is that, if you look at that first bar real close, it's something like 75 districts out of 115 have somewhere between 300 and 500 military connected students. You can see it tapers off, and then way over there at the end on the right, next to where it says 15,000, you've got Cumberland. So when I see this graph, I think to myself, where are they across the state, not just these 5 counties? Can you take me to the next slide, please? All right. So here I made a couple maps. I'm gonna just walk through them very briefly from top to bottom. So the top, you may have seen something like this before. This is the percent military connected students by district, where darker colors mean that county proportionally is more military connected students. So the darker it is in terms of that shade of purple, the more likely it is that a student there is a military connected students. You might also notice you can see the small, those are blue diamonds. Those just mark the districts where there is some type of military installation, whether it be a fort, a camp. When I lived in Charlotte, there was Army Reserves right down the street right off of Commonwealth Avenue. I lived in that neighborhood. The kids used to love to go look at all the transport vehicles they had out there. So you can see by percent, it is kind of relatively clustered in the darker purple counties there. But when you move down to that bottom map, that says just by the numbers, how are they distributed? And again, it's the same idea there. The more purple the county, the more just by the numbers military connected students there are. And you can see out there in Mecklenburg County that I just referenced, it's dark purple. It's got a lot, even though proportionally speaking, they don't make up as much of the student population, because Mecklenburg County is like 160,000 students. So when I was looking at these maps, it really just hammered in the point to me that, these students are actually distributed across the state. It's not just around these major installations out here on the coast and so forth. And I think that's a very important point. It's also going to be, I think it's relevant to the findings that we see in the SAS study. Before we switch to that slide, I just want to give you just the briefest background on that. There's a long story I could tell. You can ask if you're interested. But essentially, we partnered with SAS to basically study what we refer to as student progress. And when we say progress, we mean, did a student at least make it to where they have been historically in terms of achievement? So that they look at all of a student's prior test scores. We call that the testing history. So all the way up through the 2019 school year, because there were no tests in 2020. They look at those, and then they compare what happened in 2021 to what happened in the past, and basically just take the difference. And they ask, did they exactly meet their trajectory? Did they exceed it? Or did they fall short? So there are 3 options there, and that's what we'll see on this next bar graph here. All right, so, and again, it's kind of small, but just to get the general picture here, on the left-hand side, we have 2018, which we're using as just a comparison year. So if the bar goes to the right, that means that on average, students in that tested subject did better than we would have expected based on how they performed in the past. If it goes to the left, that means they underperformed relative to how we would have expected given their prior testing history. So that's 2018 on the left. you can see how they're all kind of, relatively close to zero. So essentially, on average, students are meeting expectations across all subjects. But then when you shift to the right-hand side, and I should here point out, this is the state average. This is not yet broken out by military connected students. This is just the state average. On the right-hand side, that is the state average student by test in 2021. So the distinct contrast that we can see here is that the majority of those bars are going to the left, which means in all of the tested subjects, you can see down the y-axis on the left, students underperformed relative to where we would expect them to perform given their prior testing history. And at DPI, we're attributing this to the overall effect of the pandemic over the past 2 years and a couple weeks now. So if we just look at this really quick, I want you to try to get this picture in your brain before we switch to the next slide. Because if you think back to these maps, and I mentioned how widespread and distributed across the state, I think that matters for this next slide, and that's something I hope to look into when I get some more data. So if you look just at the 2021, it's about the same as the state average. Here, the military connected students are the blue average, the blue bars, and the students who are not identified as military connected are the purple bars. But if you look, and we'll kind of switch one more time here, but if you look, there's not anything jumping out that says that, oh, look at this big difference between military connected students and the state average in any subject. So let's just kind of flip back to the previous one. That's the state average, and then let's flip it back. So that they kind of look very similar, and to me that goes back to the idea that they represent the state. It's not a certain demographic of students. It's not a certain group of families. It's not these counties over here. This is the average North Carolinian student, because North Carolinian people have a rich military history. So with that, I'll just open it up to any comments, discussions. I'm especially interested in any other ideas you would like for me to look into in terms of research and analysis on military-connected students and families.
Were you able to notice if we have enough previous history on their testing when we have this such transition, you know what I'm saying, that we may or may not have previous testing information to then have the statistics that you would need to project where they should be?
So that is a great question that applies to the study at large. But I did not make these bar graphs and so forth. SAS did all this, but they have a student level data file that they are going to hand back to me, hopefully sometime soon, in which I can answer questions like that to make sure that what we see here is not just a product of some anomalies in the data or some missing data over here, to make sure that this is a pretty good estimate of what the average military connected student.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So,
Hey, amazing data. I think that's just really awesome to see that. The question that comes to my mind is just to verify that it's military student identifier data you're using for this piece, and you're using all military connected students, which includes veteran, active duty, reserve, guard, all that, right?
So one thing I did directly contribute to this report, I was in charge of putting together the appendix that had the definition of military connected student. So when SAS got the data, it's 1.7 million students or so. Each student has a variable that, if that variable is 1, then that student is military connected. And the definition that we passed along to them, I worked with Angie to put that together. It matches the definition that you just gave.
It's from so he had the memo that we have from Power School that goes to the districts. That's the exact same language.
Okay, so it's just all the MSI connected kids that
Should be consistent across all,
My question on that would be, can we break out the actual active duty, reserve, guard kids, and veteran kids, and just to do comparison of those 4 categories?
That's something I was actually wondering about. Again, I've never had my hands on the actual student level data. But when I was thinking through this, I was thinking about, well, what about students who have a parent who is deployed, and other unique situations that students may be in, because it could be it could be a strain on that family, and it might show up in the testing data. I do not have the data, so unfortunately I can't give you an answer to that, but I can look into that, and I think that's worth some inquiry there.
But this is more than that.
Yes, yeah, amazing.
Yes. I'm curious as to the actual seat time that the military connected student would actually have. Let's say that we have students that are transitioning in at a particular time of the school year, and how that would impact the students' time that child would actually have. Let's say we have children that are coming in, let's say maybe February, March, and how that would impact the child's testing scores. And that's one of the things that we have to actually look at sometimes when our students are coming in. I know that sometimes our superintendents will say that impacts their scores when we have children that are transitioning in at different times of the school year. We have requested as school liaison officers that the transition times that our students, let it be December or June, but sometimes we cannot have conversations, hardcore conversations regarding that. But sometimes our children come in at different times, so I'm wondering if the transition times and the seat times that our students have.
So that that would go back to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Doug.
That goes back to what Doug was saying. We could look at mobility of these students and provide things like this, because it could be that when a military connected student moves, that affects that student in a completely different way than when a non-military connected student moves, and that would also show up on the data. Another thing that I should mention is I actually just received the 2020-21 student attendance data. So that data for every student in every month, I can tell you the percent of days they were in person, remote, or absent. And that might also be of interest to this group. Just generally, do military connected students spend more time remote? And if so, why do we think that might be? Or are there some extra supports and things that we might want to think about there? So I'll keep that in mind.
I have a question, sir. Is it possible they could look at the graduation rate for the military families, or have you done that already?
I would love to.
Okay.
If I can get my hands on the data, we can do that. I mean, see just simply if it varies significantly from what we see from the state average, that would be important. 4 years, 5 years, what different diploma statuses and so forth might be able to.
Let me also preface that this is the first time DPI has ever had a research office at the state level. So Kaylin is...
And we're just asking you. They need a bigger thing.
This is called job security.
So this is really the first time we've looked at military data to this extent. Also, you notice in the last year we have the military connected dashboards on our website. We have research that's actually disaggregating by military. This is the first time that it's really, we've talked about it happening, but this is the first time we can put it into action because we have the human capacity to do it. And I love that Kaylin so Kaylin is our quantitative researcher, and then Erin is our qualitative researcher, and which I should have just had Erin come also, because Erin is actually from Fayetteville. She's been in Lee County, Moore County, maybe Cumberland County, I can't remember. So she's from the Sand Hills region, and I believe she was a military dependent as well. So I feel like we not only do we have the human capacity, but we also have the interest to look at our military connected students. And of course, Superintendent Truitt wholeheartedly supports that. So I think we're in a very good place. And if there are, we can't promise all of the world with data and information, but if there are ideas that you have, let us know, because I think, when the time permits and he's available to do some of that analyses, then that would be good for us to look at further.
And I'm very excited about this because at Fort Bragg, our command always asks about data. And one thing that they're really looking at now is the graduation rate for the military. So I'm excited to go back and let them know they do have an analyst. This is the first time, this is exciting. I really like this. So I appreciate that. I'm from Camp Lejeune area, so Onslow County. So a couple things from our area that I would love to see. That we've heard anecdotally from our superintendent and leadership that the Onslow County scores did not decline at the same level as the state. So pulling that data out separately, being that it is the most percentage-wise, the highest percentage of military children. Pender County, while they have small military numbers, the majority of the students that we have down there come from our Special Operations Command. So that might be of interest to see when you talked about deployment and some of the extra stressors that were there. And then the last one that would be interesting is comparing districts that attended 5 days a week face-to-face compared with the remote districts.
Yep, and I do have that attendance data, so, and hopefully I'll be finding some time to work on that pretty soon.
We'll give you a big list.
So
Thank
Julie,
you
when
so
you say
much.
that, when
Yes.
you say that, that means a correlation between the installation levels, because I'm sure when command do their North Carolina Military Advisory Committee meeting, then that may be conversations that they may actually say, how are our installations faring? What's happening with our Marines? What's
Right.
happening with our Coast Guards? What's happening with our Army installations? How are our military students faring? Because there was a RAND study that was done several years ago, and now there's a scorecard
Right, I
that's
was
being
gonna
done right
mention the
now
scorecard.
that's saying, how are our military students doing? So if our Marine students did well during the pandemic, what was happening at the time with our Army students? Why was it that, what was happening at the time during the pandemic that our Army students didn't fare well? So I think that's a conversation. If Marines did well, why is it that the Army students did not? What was happening in the schools during that time?
Yeah, we do know that our students had more face-to-face time than most of the state. So
And they were out longer doing remote. So we can say that we can speculate, we can hypothesize, let's do our research talking.
Yeah.
And we can say that happened, but
Right.
that's only a speculation.
Right.
So, yes.
And I guess just a subtle plug, and I will end on this, I don't want to use too many people's time, but that's where I can come in and bring evidence to bear on these questions so that, groups like yourself can make the most informed decisions you can. So.
Well, it would help us in the future when something like a pandemic or some other calamity comes, how we prepare. So we don't lose 2 years of life in education.
Exactly.
So it can only help us to do better in the future. Great, I'm happy.
Before we leave this, I just from eyeballing the graph and eyeballing the blue bars and the purple bars, a couple of things leapt out at me, and I toss this to Dr. Stegall, Dr. Mullinex, Mr. Clifton, and whoever else has thoughts on this. But one thing I observed, again, just eyeballing it, it looked like there were more challenges in the math area than in language arts or English. And then the other thing, and again, this was a little bit more subtle, but it did seem that our military-connected students maybe fared better, comparatively speaking, during the pandemic than non-military connected students. And I just, those observations are accurate. I would just love, any reactions. I know, we don't have all the answers here, but any thoughts that have come to you all in reviewing that data and those results?
So, on that note, our first stage, which we just completed, is just to get it out there, So we are now, my office and the Office of Learning Recovery, we are trying to have those types of conversations with the people on the ground to try to generate some of these hypotheses about what may not happen, what may have been successful, other than, things than just being in person. So open to, if you all would like to schedule a conversation with my office and we can have those conversations, that would be great. But you are correct that in general, the largest differences we're seeing in math. Across the state, it's pretty consistent that, especially in the later grades math, so math 7, grade 8, math 1, which can be a range of grades. Those were the hardest hit, so to speak, subjects.
And I also think that tutor.com was one of the resources that our military families could actually heavily rely on. And those were teachers that were there 24/7, that anytime you needed to go on for homework help, that was a resource that our military families could rely on. It has been there for years, so that may be a factor that we could have said that aided our families on in the pandemic as well.
And in the current budget, we were allocated $36 million that we are currently in the process of designing how that will, the application process in CCIP. And it will be $36 million going towards grades 4 through 8 mathematics support. And by support, we mean before school tutoring, after school tutoring, or Saturday tutoring. We're designing that now, and we anticipate that will be out to our PSUs around June or July for them to apply for that, so that they can begin implementing that support in the fall. But that will all be 4 through 8 mathematics, because we do see that is a really strong need. And I think Dr. Sturgal, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I was going to say that the drop off in math, a couple reasons mainly behind that. One, in North Carolina, we are not fully staffed with math teachers to begin with. Math is the hardest to staff position, and people with math degrees typically work in private industry. And so you can imagine having substitutes or non-certified people teaching virtually was really a challenge. And secondly, math is is based on algorithms and procedures. It's not something that a lot of independent time students can solve without some guidance. And not that they're not bright enough, they just need to understand what the parameters are. And there was a lot less face-to-face time, whereas in language arts and reading itself builds reading capacity. The more you read, the better you are at it, and your vocabulary broadens, your comprehension improves, your fluency improves. Whereas with math, you can't necessarily just do you can't do math, high-level math without knowing how the algorithm works, what the rationale, what this is solving. And so they kind of compounded on one another. It's difficult to begin with in the best of circumstances, not enough certified teachers, and then you really need to understand the direct instruction piece to be able to apply it. So it did impact them quite heavily.
Angie, that 36 million, is that just a one-time 4 through 8, or was this something that'll be reoccurring that we can address in the future going forward?
Goodness, I believe it's for 3 years.
3 years?
I have to look, but I think it's through ESSER,
Okay.
ESSER 3 funding. I'm pretty sure it's through ESSER 3 funding.
So we're trying to address that 2-year in time focus for the next 3 years to get them through that.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha.
I have a question, a lot more commonly. Do most school districts have a data and accountability person at their district? Most of y'all do. Okay, those data and accountability personnel could probably pull some of that data too. Like you was asked as far as military versus civilian. Our social superintendent of data and accountability, Ron Phelps, he's pretty good at pulling data as such. And I will ask him to pull that next year so it'll be available to us.
And that's good to know. And I would like to see it across North Carolina. I'm just interested in across North Carolina. Could that be something that maybe in the near future we can be looked at?
And isn't it the case, I might be wrong here, please correct if I am, but isn't it the case that we will have data on enlistment at some point?
I think so. I think we're going to, that's actually a good reminder. That is sitting in a database that our recruiting battalion is trying to obtain. But yes, I'll circle back with Ms. Saltmarsh on that. So that was a little while back that we requested that data. But we should have that data. And it's for graduates and those students who graduate from North Carolina Public Schools and enlist into the military was the data. There's a defense data system that is stored in, and so it's a special request process, and so I just need to circle back and see where we're at on that process. It did take a little bit more time than was anticipated. Thanks, Caitlin.
So did we, in looking at the bars that really identified shortcomings, did that impact, or was that representative to the statewide, or is that typically to those military, Cumberland, Onslow, those? If you back up to that,
The one with the blue and the purple
Yes.
bars? That is, so the blue bars,
oh, I'm sorry.
slide 5, thank you. The blue bars here, this is for let me clearest way to explain this. The blue bars represent military connected students, the purple bars are students not identified as military connected, and it's included in each blue bar is every student that took that test across the state.
Statewide.
Statewide, it's not just, for example, the 5 largest counties like I
Yeah,
showed.
those little bubbles.
Right, this is every single student in the state who took each test that is included. You know, when they do these analyses, they have to drop a student for something every once in a while. But I just went back and looked at it, and so there are about 89,000 military connected students represented by the blue bars on the right hand side. So when you think, you know, this only starts in, you know, the earliest grade here is grade 3. So earlier I said there were about 98,000 military connected students across the state. This is not every grade, so this suggests to me that it is actually a very high proportion of all students that are actually represented here.
Thank you.
I can't thank Mr. Clifton enough, and Dr. Mullenix and Dr. Stegall for having him here and presenting this data. One other, you know, big picture takeaway for me that I think makes this such a valuable presentation is your maps showing that, you know, we have a broad and deep representation of military connected families and students throughout the state. I mean, this is not an Onslow, Cumberland or Wayne conversation. I mean, this is truly statewide, and I think that's really important for all our stakeholders to understand that military connected students are a big part of public schools in North Carolina. So I really appreciate that insight.
Which would be a great way to tie in, assuming picking up National Guard Reserve, which is a great way, now that we see that, there is a need or a possibility that we can, it's amazing how those dots come together.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Anything else for Mr. Clifton related to his presentation? And thank you.
I just want to remind everyone that if you go to our NC Supports Military Children website and you scroll down toward the bottom part, we do have a Tableau dashboard that has been added in. You can filter it out by state, board, region, and it will give you a visual representation of where our military connected students are. You'll see that they are virtually in every LEA across the state.
Just one more quick note. I have to run back to my desk, but I'm gonna bring some of my business cards up here, and I'll leave them with Angie and Dr. Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you. Great input.
Y'all have a good day.
Okay, I'll get the extra stuff, put them back over here. Thank you.
Commissioner Salika,
Yes, sir.
do you want me to go ahead and start?
Mr. Taggart, yeah, I think we have all your materials distributed.
Yeah.
You have them.
All your propaganda.
So I'm amazed by the data you guys are producing, and I think it's hats off to Dr. Mullenix, Dr. Stegall, Superintendent Truitt, and Kate was his first name, right? Just amazing. I had another idea just sitting there, thinking about it, was just individual education plans for students, look at military connected there versus a similar to maybe explore, how that's being done too down the road.
Yeah.
Because a lot of military connected folks have kids with special needs, and myself included, so it's a personal area of interest for me down the road. But amazing to see that. I think this is really special that you guys are putting the energy into that. Amazing. So last meeting, we had the first slide there really is just a backgrounder piece on the last meeting, which was the discussion of the National Guard and Reserve expansion for the compact to add the non-active duty dependents to coverage. So that was in case anybody else really sees it. You guys know the deal with the background of that. So since the last meeting, the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs did work with the National Guard. Mr. Brian Pierce is here from the National Guard. He will help on the National Guard side of this effort. Our department also wrote a letter of support, and we also had the Military Affairs Commission with Clay Jackson's help to provide a letter of support for the effort. And those letters are going around, so you can kind of get an idea of what was included in those. The main ask is that you take the letters, develop and ask for the General Assembly to add the expansion to the compact as an external statute. And the important kind of piece of that with the MIC3 guidance is that they don't want the compact itself being directly affected by any changes that we do locally in NC. So we want to keep the compact itself intact and kind of add a North Carolina specific variation that includes this coverage. So that's why you'll see some of the language in the letters kind of indicating that external statute piece. Key considerations around that.
Doug,
I think the audience is saying they can't hear us. I just saw a message come and said they can't hear us. Okay, yes. Yeah, they said they can't hear us. Okay.
Hold on a second.
Let's see the on button on here.
1 second, Doug. We're good, we can try again.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I probably got a little bit more. Yeah.
Can the audience hear me now? I think I might be working this time.
Yeah,
Yes.
good. Style.
Okay. All right, so just to go back real quick, the action, the letters of support were developed, you'll see on the slide there, from 3 different organizations, National Guard, Military Affairs Commission, and our Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. And the action is to basically develop the legislative request to go to the General Assembly to make the change. Key considerations, kind of in the letters you'll see, are the Title 32 kind of consideration that needs to be made there to make sure we're inclusive of that. One of the kind of challenges around it is interstate moves for National Guard and Reserve in some cases, and the reason I included this was specifically because the compact rules are written with the context of interstate moves, and we need to be really careful. We don't just apply the rules to National Guard Reserve kids, but we make sure the rules have applicability to National Guard and Reserve kids. So we need to make sure that there's a separate kind of definition around that in the legislative change. One of the kind of questions that we had was whether this was feasible for the short session or long session, and that's one question for Representative Loftus to address, because it kind of gives us how much time we have to kind of get this packaged up for the General Assembly to consider.
it is already in bill drafting, because it doesn't require physical funding or anything like that. Bill drafting is finishing up on how to word that. I've spoken to the speaker and I've spoken to the rules chair, saying it's almost like a technical correction, but it's just an add-on. So I haven't got any pushback saying no, it won't be allowed. So if I find that out, I'll make sure everyone knows that. But right now, we're still going, starting May 18th, short session.
When would the expectation for the bill drafting to come back for review? Because that leads to the second point, which is my recommendation is that we have an ad hoc committee potentially through the council to review the legislation draft and provide feedback relative to our perspective back to Representative Law.
While I'm here today, I will check with bill drafting and see where they are, if we can get this back quickly.
Fantastic. Well, that kind of
And just to
addresses
follow up on what you just suggested, Mr. Taggart, whatever is generated in bill drafting, I'd be happy to, create an ad hoc group. I think I have authority as the commissioner to review that and not to exclude anyone at the table or who's online or whatever. We would be transparent and share that information with everybody. But, our message to you is we will work with you and your colleagues and staff however we can to move this along.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Slayton, and Representative Loftus, appreciate your time on that. But really, that's the update, you can read through the letters. Are there any questions about the letters, or any concerns you guys have?
Can I add one thing? So for the Military Affairs Commission, Senator Perry is our Legislative Affairs Chair. So if you have any questions, reference our support for it, for the MAX support, Senator Perry would be the one I'd ask you to reach out to.
Cool.
And he's very well versed on all of this.
All right, thank you.
And Representative Martin also.
All right.
Thank you.
There's no questions. My contact information is there on the slides. If anyone needs copies of the letters, whether you're in the audience or not, I'm happy to provide that to you. Just send me an email, and you can get a copy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Taggart. Our next item is a collection of topics that were suggested through the school systems and Dr. Godwin and her office at Fort Bragg. And I think we have some supportive materials to go along with each one of those, 1 through 4. And the intention here is to just allow free-flowing conversation of folks who may have suggested these topics or have a particular interest in them or want to share an anecdote, a story from the field of their experience with any of these issues. And we'll begin with custody or caretaker documentation for deploying personnel. And I think that there are some pages from the current issue of the family care plan that we can bring up just to have that as a backdrop. I will say, just to introduce this first subject, it's our understanding in the Cumberland County Schools for deploying personnel, and particularly those single parents who find themselves with orders to go somewhere far away for an unknown period of time, that our practice and procedure internally is to rely upon our military parents to work through the family care plan, to provide us with the caretaker or guardian affidavit that's a part of that package. And that then, tells us who we can look to as the surrogate parent, so to speak, while the parent's deployed. And then we also request, and this is never an issue, just for our files, a copy of the orders that the individual's being deployed under. Sometimes it's individual to that particular person, or it may be a letter from a commanding officer or unit-wide orders for that person. But that's our experience. We have folks online from Cumberland County Schools, and Mr. Lattimore's here in person. I don't know that we have any particular issues with this. We try hard not to, knowing all of the different pressures and issues that deploying personnel are dealing with. Our sense is at the building level that our principals and their support teams are pretty well versed in what to do in these situations. But again, for the Cumberland County folks, I open it up to y'all for any comments, and anyone else, Camp Lejeune or wherever on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sokol. Once again, echo what Mr. Sokol said. Before, we did have some issues in Cumberland because we used to ask for court docket as far as custody, change of custody. However, since we brought on the affidavit and we got more smart about what we can do, and thanks to Mr. Sokol reading through the articles and policies, then now Cumberland, we're better off with educating our student support teams in Cumberland County of the documents that they need when they're going TDY for an extended period of time or being deployed. So now we're better versed with that.
And I think also, Mr. Lattimore and I, we actually had to go to our JAG office. And talking with our JAG attorney, when she looked at the packet that we had been provided by our service members, a lot of those documents also had to be updated. So I will encourage all of our school liaison officers, when our, some of our deployments have occurred back in 18, possibly 17. So when we look at our DA forms, make sure that they are updated as necessary, because some of those forms, she said, okay, we are on DA form 22. So we need to make sure that those forms are updated. And so, and also some of our forms had Marine documents, Air Force documents, and she said, okay, well, this, I'm not familiar with this form, let me look at this form. So we need to be familiar with the forms that our service members are bringing us, that we are utilizing the forms that are necessary and applicable to our installation, so that we make sure that we're serving our military service members to the utmost that we need to do so.
And that's a great point, Dr. Godwin, as far as those different forms. I was not educated of that until we went to a JAG office of the forms. That I had the forms, but I was thinking all of them might have been Army or across the board. And as Dr. Godwin said, they were not familiar with those. Like, oh, this is this form, this is for the Marine Corps, this is for the Navy.
And National Guard.
Did we know those was out there? Oh, they know that was out there. We're Army.
Don't exclude our National Guard, because when she said, she made a allusion, well, no, she said something about National Guard, and I said, oh no, that is National Guard. And so we need to make sure that any of our service members that we're serving them to our utmost in our ability as school liaison officers and military service members, because we want to make sure we're doing what we need to do.
I want, if I could, I'm sorry, I want everybody to participate on this subject, but while we're having our Cumberland County Fort Bragg conversation, I want to acknowledge Dr. Stephanie Shook, who's up there on the screen, from our Student Support Services team in Cumberland County, and then also Mr. Carlos Swan, and we appreciate them participating virtually today. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, we had started working after the change to the compact that allowed not just deploying families, but families where someone was going for training or something else. We're in the process of creating a fillable PDF form, because the letter from the commanding officer isn't always easy to get if they leave quickly, or the commanding officer is on a ship or on leave or whatever. So this would allow them to digitally sign the document and fill it out in a way that is acceptable to our county and our installation, and our military attorneys have looked it over to make sure that we have everything we need on there that meets the compact requirements. So we don't have that quite finished yet. When we do, we'll share that, and if that's something helpful.
Are they using like the DocuSign or any kind of electronic
It's
signature,
their-
or are they still having to?
Their Department of Defense CAT card.
Okay.
They just can click on an Adobe PDF Pro when they're on a CAC-enabled computer. It would automatically sign it.
I think that would make it easier on the service member. It takes some of the stress off of our service members when they're trying to, because there are some, in our cases, they are deploying in 18 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And we also have on there that it can be the commanding officer or his or her designee. So if they do happen to be on emergency leave somewhere, the family doesn't have to wait a week to get into schools.
Hi, this is Stephanie Shook. I just wanted to add in there that I'm very thankful that you brought up the TDY en route. We've had a few of those concerns here in Cumberland when families go TDY en route, and getting that letter from the commanders, and some of them, it's contingent upon them graduating from that particular training course. So I really think it's great conversation about the TDY en route.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood?
I think this is great conversation, and I wonder, because I do feel like North Carolina leads in a lot of these operationalizing of the compact. Because having the compact is important, but actually implementing the compact and how to implement that compact is what's so important. And when we think of the school side of things, the things we're talking about now, it's like you said, if you haven't trained, or if the presence of folks to train is not there, I think it makes a huge difference in how that implementation occurs. So I'm wondering if we could have some kind of working group or something that kind of puts some of these operational things that schools could refer to. We had a call from, was it Maryland, about 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
And they needed to know how to facilitate a graduation from another school. And so we were taking them through the different steps. So I just keep thinking about that operational side of things, that in a school setting, with all the hundreds of things coming in, especially with all the things that have been coming in, if we have it where it's a, don't forget, you've got the caregiver affidavit, but don't forget to make sure that that caregiver is on their authorization to release form at the school, because we had that happen one year where the child, literally that person. So some of those operational things that could help the mindset of the school, I think
it's almost like a handbook.
Almost like a handbook, and I don't want to make, when we say that, I don't want to make it seem like it's too overwhelming for our group to do, but I think it would be so worth it for, look at our maps, for those folks.
This, do this, just like.
Yes, yes.
Is your computer plugged in?
We come together.
Did you turn it off and turn it back on?
That's right. Our conversations have been so rich, and if we could get some of these things, here are the 10 steps you should follow for this. And and then if you run into this situation, and we know we can't cover every, I'm talking about the big ones that come up the most.
That are reoccurring.
I think it would help our schools across the state, because the law's there.
Right.
But it's the nuanced things you learn along the way when you're implementing these types of things in that are being discussed, that I think it can make a big difference. Because we have some smart people doing the right things.
This is Carlos, Cumberland County. Also, I know I heard the statement of designee, but as you know, they got to have also a letter from that designee stating that they're in charge to make that decision. So just make sure that we don't just get Joe Blow filling out a document saying that they can get off that day or whatever's going on with that process. So they usually have a chain of command letter that goes with that, or I forget the name of it, but it's basically giving up the power to that designee to do that.
Absolutely.
And that's a perfect example of the kind of operational details I think, Ms. Livingston is talking about. And I just, in response to what you shared, and I agree with you, and also knowing that, everybody else has their day job in addition to being part of this group. And I'm just thinking out loud, Dr. Molex, Dr. Stegall, was there money in the budget for additional staff support at DPI? For, and I'm just thinking in terms of somebody who, is here
Could be the
in this
clearinghouse.
building, who could coordinate putting something like that together.
So we have, funding was provided through General Assembly for a state level military counselor. We had a little bit of turnover in human resources, and so there was a delay, and we are at the phase of requesting position numbers. And as soon as those position numbers are secured, then we can post that for
for state agency, even if you have the funds, you can't create a position until you get an Office of State Human Resources have to give you a position number. So
Sure.
that's where we are with that.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Well, and again, I mean, I think it's great that the money was appropriated and we can see, getting to that point of having that dedicated military counselor on staff with you all, and, just in terms of making sure that any type of final work product is vetted and official and can be rolled out to all 115 school districts. Again, you all work here every day, but I'm thinking that might be a wonderful project for somebody who finds himself in that position. Because I agree. I mean, there's a finite set of recurring issues that just happen over and over again. And for the districts and the administrators and the staff members who aren't living and breathing this stuff every day, it can just seem like the biggest deal in the world, and in the meantime, we got a military family that's kind of hanging out there, and so.
I think the districts would like it coming from DPI,
Yes.
advice coming from us
Sure.
anyway. They're gonna feel more comfortable
Sure.
implementing.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we could all rely on. Yes, sir.
Do you have some of you districts that have a lot of military families, do you have a running list of like an FAQ? Some of the questions that get asked generally that we can, once we get this position up and running, that we could use some of your feedback, things that keep coming up.
Yep. Yep.
That would be beneficial, maybe connecting with you on, I'm sure you have the documents that can help us consolidate all of it in one place.
Oh, I think everybody represented would be eager to share,
Yes.
our own lists and
How much
procedures
computer
and
space do you have?
I put this in the chat. This is Stephanie again. Once the rapid deployments had started here at Fort Bragg, we kind of sat down as a team and developed an unofficial guide for our schools it went out to all 89 of our schools. And it had a lot of information about some need to know for the schools about deployment. So putting in some of this information would be really great. And we're willing to share if that's something that,
Cool.
I think that's right on the beam, Dr. Schiff. Anything else on caretaker documentation, deploying personnel? Everybody's time is valuable, and we don't want to belabor any one topic. So the next one on the list is post-deployment block leave, and for that item and some incredible work that's been done on it, I want to give all the credit to the Moore County Schools and to Rolly Sampson, their in-house military liaison. And Dr. Mullinex, I know she was juggling several different scheduling commitments today. Is she going to be able to join us?
She's not able to. She had an additional appointment she needed
Okay, okay. Well, we appreciate her work and look forward to hearing from her at future meetings. But we have those documents I think we can pull up and
I can address that. If
yes,
need
ma'am.
be.
I was getting ready. Thank you for volunteering before I don't want to voluntold my colleague from Fort Bragg.
Which document do you want up? We have the attendance policy, the absence request form, the excused absence form.
I think, let's see.
There's also the MOU between Moore County.
How about the request for military connected absence to be excused?
It's probably a little difficult for you to read.
I think if it's this one from my old-fashioned paper here, it says K-12 military connected absence request form. I think that's got pretty much all the information on it.
It is on the website. Moore County Schools said they had the fortitude to actually put it on the website. We, when Dr. Grimacy came into the district, he asked, we met with Dr. Grimacy prior to Rolly's position, and so we actually had the discussion, and because one of the things that the White House contacted us from the West Wing, and so if the White House, you all know, if they contact you, everything stops and you begin to move. And so they were asking us, is there a policy for our military connected students? And we said that they work with our military connected students. But when we sat down and talked with Dr. Grimacy at that time, he said, what do I need to do to put a policy in place? And so at that time, because of our connection with Moore County students, Dr. Grimacy said, I actually want to put a policy in place. And so after our conversations, he actually signed an agreement with Fort Bragg and Moore County Schools at that time. And so what he decided was there were 5 contingencies that needed to be put into place. And one of those was it cannot be done that a child would be absent from school doing testing. And then we had to actually look at the number of absences that a child had at that time. So if a child had already had 30 absences, then we had to actually look at that that child being out of school during that time. Also, we had to look at, the child had to actually, the parent would have to actually talk with the